Hey guys, it's Rogowy here with another tutorial for you, and today we are looking at portrait photography. We're looking at color correction. We're looking at ways that we can improve the quality of our portraits, and we're going to be looking at an image that we're going to adjust. I'm going to look for some common things that you may or may not want to fix on your portraits when you do some portrait photography of your friends, of family, or maybe you've got a customer that you're doing photos for. These are a couple things that you're going to look for and maybe adjust if you want. All right, so let's get started. In the Wednesday tutorial, the tutorial we're working on this week, I have put a file, DSC2969, of a young lady who has been photographed in a studio setting. I want to really quickly say that I take no credit for the photos being used here. They're for educational purposes only, and yeah, we're strictly using it just to show a technique here. So let's open this up. Now, before we get started, you'll notice that this is a DNG file. And a DNG file is just a different type of raw file. I believe DNGs are created by Nikon cameras, whereas CR2s are made by Canon cameras. So I'm going to open this with Photoshop. I noticed that Photoshop's not down in my bar here, so I'm just going to right click it and just open it with Photoshop. It should open automatically anyways with Photoshop. And we'll just wait for that to load. There it goes. And so before we wait for this file to open, why do we want to color correct? Why do we want to adjust our images? Well, for a number of reasons. All right, if this was going to be used in a magazine, for example, or you know, we were going to give this off to a customer, sometimes there's adjustments that might be requested by the customer, or you might want to make to enhance the photo a little more. So here's our subject. Now, I picked this particular photo because of the fact that she has a lot of blemishes, freckles in this case. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the techniques that I'm going to show you here could work for acne, it could work for freckles, it could work for warts, it could work for blemishes, any sort of skin blemishes. It's just, this is a really obvious, you know, the freckles are all over and it's very obvious, so that's why I picked this. So first off, when we open any raw image, we want to set our white balance, so let's do that right away. I'm going to click somewhere in the background, and you're going to see that that adjusts the white balance. Looking for a neutral gray, somewhere maybe up in here seems to be okay. There we go. I'm not going to really go into all the settings that I'm making here. I just want you guys to kind of adjust as you see fit. All right. So there are a couple issues with this particular portrait. Not anything major. First of all, I will talk about what is done well. First of all, there's a natural vignette, right, probably caused by a background light. That gives us that vignette. We don't even have to add one. All right. The photographer has nicely placed catch lights in the eye, creating a nice effect, nice soft lighting. All right, pretty decent that way. All right, now what we see where there can be some improvements is that the model in this case decided that she was going to go completely natural. Very, very little makeup, which is fine. Like I said, I don't want people to think I'm sexist or anything here. I'm just simply showing techniques that would be used if this was brought into a you know, a magazine, you know, this for use in a magazine or an advertising. All right, we got a lot of gloss on her face. We got a lot of reflections. We're gonna clean those up as well, and other little minor things that we'll look at as well. Again, all of these are in hopes that you're going to use this with your own images and you know, fix up yours using these same methods. So let me just adjust a little more here. All right, and I'm not really going to talk through these steps because this is all stuff we've seen before, but I am going to adjust it to what I think looks like a good starting point for this particular image. And I think we're almost there. All right, so that's a pretty decent starting point. Now, the one real important thing I want to show you here, and I just turned it off actually, is the fact that most pictures that come straight out of your camera are not going to have lens correction on. And this is something that way too many people miss. And you get the customer or the subject saying, why do I look so fat? You know, why does my face look so stretched? It looks like I've put on, 10 pounds or whatever. And, some people would say, oh, well, that's just you not seeing pictures of yourself very often or whatever. But the truth is, because of the distortion on the outside of the lens, because it's curved, we do get the center of our lens stretching out that face. So I always go into lens corrections, this tab right here, and I turn that on and watch the difference here. Pretty significant. All right, there's with it on, there's with it off. You sure notice it when you turn it on. All right, you can see it's a huge difference. Her face does look bloated. It looks almost fisheye-like. So I'm going to turn that on. Now, the nice thing about that is when we are shooting in RAW, it's able to detect what kind of camera we are using, what kind of lens we are using, all the rest of it automatically, and it corrects for that. All right, so we don't need to add a vignette in this case. We're not really doing anything else to this picture as far as the RAW settings go. So we're going to just hit Open Image. And here we go. It's loading. And we're almost there. There it is. I don't know why my computer's running so slow today. Let's take a quick look. Command 0, let's take a look at the entire image. There it is. This must be a pretty high quality image for it to be making my Photoshop run so slow. There it is. Now, like I said, if I zoom in on this picture, you can see that this was taken very, very natural. All right, there's very little cover up or makeup on her face. Very natural. And so we're going to look at fixing some of that just for the sake of showing you how to do it for your images. Like I said, we're not taking anything against this lovely model here. We're just looking at ways that we can enhance the image. We can make it a little smoother, a little bit better. So let's start with zooming on her neck here, where we've got a couple of real big birthmarks. And again, this is natural. There's nothing wrong with this. This is natural. So I'm just going to show you techniques. Now, suppose this was a large zit. This was some acne. All right. Traditionally, what I would do is I would take my clone stamp, all right, and I would set it to a nice soft brush like that. And I would enlarge my brush size so that it's about the same size, maybe slightly bigger than the blemish. And then I can hold Option, click where there's some clean skin nearby, and just paint over it like that. And when I go back to Command 0, you have no idea that it was even there. A better technique, a technique that I believe is more improved, and I'll explain why in a second, is the healing brush technique, and I'll show you how that works. So if we hold down on the Band-Aid tool here, hold down on that, and go to the healing brush, which is underneath, that's the second tool. We now have the healing brush selected, all right? And I'm going to just show why I think this technique or using this tool is better than the clone stamp. Okay, so we're going to look at why the healing brush is better, like I said. So go to the brush options. Make sure your brush is set fairly soft, maybe about 25%. All right, and we're going to focus on this little blemish on her chin here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make my brush larger than the blemish itself. And this is a little trick that was taught to me that I think is really, really effective, is if the blemish that we're trying to fix up is darker than the surrounding skin. And we're going to go up to the top here and we're going to set it to lighten. If the blemish for whatever reason was lighter than the surrounding skin, then we could go up here and set it to darken. All right, and here's how this tool works. It's just like the clone stamp. We hold Option, we select some skin that's clean around the blemish, and then we just click on there. And you'll notice that what it has done, rather than just taking the skin and putting a drop of it there, which would end up with a very light spot, what the healing brush has done is it's compared all the pixels around the blemish, around the area we're trying to fix, and it's filled it in with those colors that it's found nearby. Again, this is much more of an intelligent way of fixing blemishes, all right, because of the fact that it compares. All right, so I prefer to use the healing brush when possible. Now here's where it gets a little glitchy. If we've got a blemish on the edge of a dark and a light area, well, obviously if we try to correct that using the healing brush, watch what happens. So let's say I want to get rid of this little blemish here. So I take some of this skin here, click it here. Look what happens. We actually get a darkening effect of the skin. And the reason for that is it is comparing the black out here as well and sucking that in too. So we don't want that to happen. All right, if you've got blemishes along the edge of a dark and light area where there's a lot of contrast, then go with the old-fashioned way, the clone stamp, and use the healing brush for the ones that are on the interior. All right, so again, very easy. Option, click on top of the blemish, and it's gone. And as you can tell, if I zoom in on that, it's hard to tell, but it maintains the pores and the texture of the skin that was there because it is compared nearby. Also, because of the fact that we set this up here to lighten, all it is affecting is the dark areas of the part that we click. So really, it's only targeting the freckle or the birthmark in this case. It's not affecting anything else. So that's very, very effective. It works really, really well. So let's just go ahead here and clean up some of the more noticeable skin blemishes, and I'm going to just keep on the healing brush, and you can see how fast you can go. Now, don't worry about the small ones. I'm going to show you a different technique for those. Let's just go to the really noticeable ones. So here we go. Clicking, and it doesn't have to just be clicking. You can paint with it as well, and it's going to compare again. It's going to clean that all up. And you can see how it does a great job. All right, any of the large ones, the really large noticeable ones is what I'm doing here. Just cleaning them up really quickly. And as you can tell, it does a great job of matching that skin that was there before. All right. Or sorry, not that it was there before, but it really does a great job of matching the surrounding skin, so it looks very, very natural. All right, so I'm going to only do a couple more, and then I'm going to show you a technique that we can use to get rid of all the blemishes kind of at once. So we're just going around, touching everything up nicely here. All right, we got a couple on the shoulder. Clean those up as well. And again, I don't have anything against anybody with freckles or skin blemishes or anything like that. I'm just simply showing a technique that can be used on your own photographs when you want to adjust for imperfections in the skin. That's all we're doing here. All right, so that's good. Now, another thing I want to show you before we, smooth out our skin is we're going to look at how to, we call it digital makeover or digital plastic surgery. We're going to touch up her face a little bit. So a fast way, or a way that to make this run faster, is we're going to use the selection tool. I'm going to leave that on 0 for feathering, and we're going to draw a selection around this part of her face, just like that. So we got the entire face selected, we got some of the neck. All right, we got that part of her face sorry, that part of her features right there. And we're going to go to filter. We're going to go to Liquify, which is the fifth one down, sorry. Fourth one. And it'll bring you into this menu. Now, if you haven't used Liquify before, here's how it works. Liquify allows us to move or adjust parts of a person's, the picture in any way as we see fit. So just the angle that this shot was taken from is kind of giving her the look that, you know, she's got a bruised face. And I know that it's her high cheekbones, but we're going to kind of smooth that out a bit so it doesn't look so bulged out. And the way you do that with Liquify is we can change our brush size, obviously, by bringing that up. And we want to go with a size about there, a little smaller, maybe about there. I'm going to put in an exact number. I'm going to put in 275. All right, there it is. Something like that. And we got a bunch of different tools we can use here, and I'm going to explain what each one does. I don't want you to go and mess her face up too much, but we're going to use the forward warp tool. That's the first one. We can still use the brackets, so we can make our brush bigger or smaller that way. Okay, but the way that this works is we want to position our brush directly over the area we want to fix. So we want to bring this sort of puffy area in. So we try to imagine where the center of our brush would be, and we position that over that area of contrast where the skin and the hair kind of meet, and then we click and hold and gently pull it in. So you see what's happening here? All right, what we're doing is we are pulling in part of her skin here, all right, and we are thinning the face by doing that. Now, let me just do a little bit better here. Now, you'll notice that my brush pressure is cranked, and I'm going to maybe bring that down a bit to, I don't know, let's try 75. I just think it's making too harsh of an effect. And it does take a little bit of experimenting with just to get it correctly. And you don't want to do too much at a time, because if you do too much at a time, it's going to look really bad. All right. And I'm going to hit OK. Now, let's take a close-up look of that. It looks pretty bad. All right, I'm not happy with that. So I'm going to actually undo that. We're going to go a step backwards. We're going to go into our Liquify options once again. We're going to go Filter, Liquify. We're going to look at some of the options that can make this a little bit better. Turn on Advanced Mode. We got brush density, we got brush pressure. All right, again, the brush size should overlap that area you're trying to fix. I'm going to make it a little smaller. All right, maybe like that. And our brush density is how dense it's going to paint. And so I'm going to go lower on that. I'm going to bring down my pressure as well down to 50% here. And you're going to see now when I pull it, it's much softer. All right, it's not pulling as much of a, a large area as before. So we can do a little bit at a time. A better way of doing it, all right, I'm going to hit cancel one more time. You might be wondering what the heck I'm doing here, is to draw a selection around the area you want to fix. So in this case, we're just going to draw a selection just around that part of her face, filter Liquify. That's going to give us a much closer view so we can see what we're doing much better. Same thing with the settings, they're all set. And now we can gently pull in that part of the face a little bit. And you want to do this kind of sparingly. You don't want to go crazy because it'll look really bad if you go like crazy on this. All right, so I'm just pulling in that cheek so it's not sticking out quite as much. You have to kind of be a bit of a, I don't know, a little bit of an artist here. You don't want it to look fake, you don't want it to be noticeable, but at the same time you want there to be an improvement. So you can see here how I've kind of smoothed that out. And what I'm looking for is just to make sure there's no noticeable breaks along the side of the face. And when you're happy with that, just hit OK. So you can see if I go to my history here, window history, and I look at before and after, you can see how I brought that swollen cheek in quite a bit. Now I could go extreme, I could bring it right in, it's going to look bad, but you can change that quite a bit by doing that. One thing we're going to do again is we're going to go into Liquify one more time. This time I'm going to make a selection around the face. I just want to show you what the other tools do. We're going to go Filter Liquify, and we're going to look at some of the other ones. Now, we're not going to look at Reconstruct. Some of these are, in my opinion, pretty useless. Twirl clockwise. So make a big brush and paint, and it just twirls the pixels. I really can't think of a use for that other than just making funny creations of people by warping their skin. All right. The pucker tool. So the way that this works is, let's use the eyes here. We can shrink things. All right. So we made her eyes smaller. Now this one does actually have some uses. I've used it before on various parts of people's bodies just to kind of bring in things. You know, if you want to shrink the nose a little bit, there's a good use. You know, if somebody's got a really big nose and you want to bring that in a bit, you know, pucker tool works pretty good. The bloat tool does the opposite basically. So if we want these eyes to be bigger, you know, we can click on that. We can enlarge the eyes a little bit. Now, keep in mind that very quickly it becomes noticeable if you bloat them too much. So a couple clicks goes a long way just to make her eyes look a little bigger and fuller. All right, the push left tool, again, not used very often. The freeze mask tool, this is used pretty often, but we're going to talk about it in a later tutorial. Thaw mask, okay, hand tool just to move around and to zoom. So mainly the ones I wanted to show you were the push, the twirl, the pucker, and the bloat. The other ones we'll look at in a later tutorial. So let's just hit OK. And so we made a few minor adjustments to her, and we're going to hit Command D so we can see those adjustments that have been made. All right, so let's just take a look at before and after. And again, we don't want to make her look too cartoony. Those eyes I maybe went a little too extreme on, but it's just to show the effect. Now, here's what I want to show you for fixing skin. All right, so if you want to clean a person's blemishes out kind of in one shot, rather than going painstakingly, you know, blemish by blemish and removing them that way, then this is kind of a technique that does do the entire image, but it, as with most things that does it all at once, it doesn't always do a great job. But let's just take a look. So you're going to go to Image Mode, and you're going to switch the mode to CMYK. And it's going to ask you, do you want to switch profiles? And we're going to say OK. And now up in Window, Channels, this is weird because usually this shows up next to Layers. I don't know, somebody switched this on me. You got your Layers, and usually the tab next to it is Channels. If you don't see that, just go to Window, Channels, and it'll be there. And we're going to look through our channels by clicking, starting with Cyan. And we can look at how her skin is going to break down, basically color by color. And you will find that the majority of any sort of skin blemish is either on the yellow or the magenta. In this case, the yellow by far has the most noticeable skin blemishes on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight the yellow channel. We're going to press Command A to select the entire channel. We're going to press Command C or Edit Copy to copy that channel. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to CMYK in the channels. We're going to turn that on so that all of our color comes back. We're going to click the Layers tab so we go back to our background layer. We're going to go to Image Mode RGB. we're going to switch it back into RGB. And you might be asking, well, what was the point of that? Why did we switch back to RGB when we were in CMYK? Well, when we were in CMYK, we copied that channel and it's still in memory in Photoshop. So we're going to go Edit, Paste, and you'll notice now that that channel that we selected and copied from before has now been pasted over top of our original image. And what a noticeable difference if you turn that on and off, just in how many little blemishes it picks up in that channel. It's pretty shocking. And what we're going to do with that layer selected, we're going to go to Image, Adjustments, Invert. And now what we're doing is we are isolating, she kind of looks like a zombie, but we're isolating all of those blemished areas of her skin. And you can see that it's done that. Now, you might be saying, well, what's the point of that? All we end up with is some zombie-looking girl. We're going to change the blending mode now. And depending on the picture that you're working with, different blending modes will work better or worse. First thing you want to do is you want to lower the opacity down to about 30%. And then you want to change your blending mode. Let's start, we might get it right away. Let's go with a vivid light. And we can see that we got all sorts of weird little green highlights on her face. So we're just going to tone that back until we don't see those very noticeably anymore. Let's just look at a few different blending modes. Let's see if we can find one that eliminates those blemished areas as much as possible. Now, what is this doing? You might ask, why are we doing this? The bright areas you see are the places where the freckles were noticeable. All right, so what we're doing is we are reducing the opacity of that layer until the color of the freckle matches the surrounding skin. All right, so I'm going to just try a few different blending modes just to see if I can find one that really nails it. And sometimes it's tough. There's not always one that's perfect. All right, and it's not always noticeably better either. So let's just see if this one goes really green. All right, I'm thinking so far vivid light, for the sake of getting through this tutorial, let's just look at before and after. Vivid light really smooths her skin out. And you can see that, it's noticeable. All right, if we look at her skin, let's just zoom in here, and we can bring that up a little bit, or we can try a different blending mode. Like I said, find one that works better. You'll see that when we have that turned on, it's making a noticeable improvement. If you look at her freckles along her face, it's making a huge difference in the appearance of those freckles. They're being smoothed out. Now, obviously, we're not going to just leave it like this because it actually makes her look a little more washed out, especially in her hair and in this case, the background is not affected too much. But look at the difference. If you look down in her chest and in her shoulders, along her face, when I turn that on and off, we're seeing a huge difference in the smoothness of the skin. Now, another thing I like about this is that the quality of the skin, we're not smoothing the skin. All of the pores, all of the creases in the skin, everything is still intact. We're simply just finding a match for the freckles so that they match the skin as closely as possible. And again, if I spent more time, I could get this pretty good. What I'm going to do on that mask layer is I'm going to take the eraser tool, and I'm going to just set my hardness to 0. And with my eraser, I'm going to erase the parts around the face, the parts that shouldn't be affected. Really, I only want it to affect the skin. So I'm just going to go around here. And it's okay if I kind of just touch the shoulder a little bit or the skin a tiny bit. But generally, we want to get it just on the parts that should be affected, which, like I said, includes the skin. All right, so here we go. We're going all around. Oops. And I painted way too much there, and that sucks because I didn't let go at all during that, so I have to redo that. So I'm going to just keep painting here. I'm going to go around all the parts where the skin shouldn't be affected, or where the effect shouldn't have affected the photo. Like I said, that includes the hair, the background, all of that stuff. We're just going to get rid of it. And so we bring back kind of the natural color of those areas of the photo. All right, now again, if I wanted to spend a lot of time on this, I could go really carefully and meticulous and get all those areas. But you can see, all right, that we have managed to correct those blemishes somewhat, all right, in a very quick and easy way. Another place to erase that I forgot is in the eyes. You don't want the color of the eyes getting affected at all. You want them to be pretty bright. So there we go. All right. Now, we're going to just zoom in here on one more thing. In portrait photos, the most important thing is the eyes. And you want to make sure that the eyes are in focus at all times if you are shooting a subject, unless you're going for a certain type of an effect where, you know, it doesn't matter, or the effect is purposely blurring out the subject in the background where the eyes don't really matter. But most times when you're doing portrait photos, you want the eyes to be in focus. That's where we're drawn to first. So what I like to do, obviously the catch lights are out of here, which is really nice. Nice touch for the photographer to always add catch lights. Always try to include that if you can. But depending on the direction of the light, I like to add a bit of a halo to the opposite side where the light's coming in. Sometimes you get it naturally. In this case, it's not really noticeable. We're going to go to the dodge tool. Click the dodge tool. We're going to go to a soft, completely zero hardness, exposure about 50%. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint over the edge of the eye here. Just a couple times. And I know that that looks so minor, but if I go back and forth, it just adds a little bit of a highlight to the edge of the eye. And if you looked at my other tutorials, you could also find out how to add fake catch lights if you didn't get them in your shot. Obviously, they're not going to look as natural or as good as the real ones, but you can adjust for that as well. So anyways, I think we're pretty much done with this. We looked at a few things. We looked at the distortion, for how to correct for that. We looked at how to use Liquify to fix, we could pretty much do it for anything. You know, if something's sticking out or we want to trim up a part of the subject, we can use that really quick. We looked at how to fix up skin. We looked at how to adjust for, you know, big blemishes, zits, whatever, by using the healing brush or the clone stamp. All right, all of these can be used and applied to your own images. Again, this is kind of a starting point. By no means would I say, oh, I'm done with this now. However, it is an improvement, all right, from where we started to where we ended. They're very minor touch-ups, in my opinion, but you can see a very noticeable difference, all right? There's our starting point. There's our ending point. And if we didn't do the lens correction thing for, you know, the adjustment in RAW, then that would be an even bigger improvement on the original. So anyways, make sure you save that. I'm going to save mine to the desktop. Save as. I'm going to call it Model Touch-Up. Just like that. Save. And hit OK. And we are finished. One last comment. And I know in the past people have said, you know, do photos need to be photoshopped? Do we need to actually go through this process? Personally, I don't agree with it. Personally, I think, you know, people look good the way that they are. They probably don't need adjustments unless, you know, it's something that's not their fault, like a giant zit on the side of their face or something like that. But you would be kidding yourself if you didn't think that pretty much every photo that's out there in print, in magazines, and in advertising hasn't been touched up using very, very similar methods. So that's why we're learning this. Again, whether you decide to use it or not, it's totally up to you. Till next time, I hope you got through that. See you later.